My name is Tanveer Adse, and today in this module we'll be talking about Progressive Artists Group of Bombay. The Progressive Artists Group and its formation has an important role in the shaping of modern art and the movements that followed it after 1947. In this module, we'll be briefly talking about the artists who were responsible for the formation of this group and the ideologies or the ideology that became instrumental in the establishment of this group in 1947. Let's come quickly to the introduction about the group and the atmosphere in which it was formulated or formed in 1940s, and see how the members of this group were motivated to deviate from the traditional British academic style followed by the call for revivalism, which essentially came from Bengal with Rabindranath Tagore, Gagnendranath Tagore, and others who followed the suit. The Progressive Artists Group, PAG, was formed in Bombay in 1947, the same year India got independence from British rule. The formation of this group is seen as a conscious artistic departure from the alien British academic style of painting, which they had not learnt themselves. I mean the Progressive Artists Group, the members of this group. But at the same time, they were vehemently against idea of homogeneous and spiritless nationalistic attempts at Indianness or Indianization of the art, which was the sole motive of Bengal Renaissance, and was propagated by the Bengal school in the form of call for a revival movement in the Indian art. It was a stand against the prevalent naturalistic art practice that was being taught in the art schools established by British. We saw in the previous modules that how British established various art colleges across India where academic art was taught and practiced. The artists of the Progressive Group rejected the British academic style of painting and chose to work themselves in a modern European style of painting. It was again a revolt of homogenizing the Indian art practice, the diversity of India's artistic history, and as a stand against the prevalent traditions of painting and the art was seen and patronized by the connoisseurs of art in India, and how it was taught and looked upon by the academia. Bombay was an important art center during the British rule, as we have seen in the previous modules, and as an important art center, it had changed significantly after the independence. An exhibition held by the Calcutta Group in Bombay in 1944, 3 years before the formation of Progressive Artists Group, left a considerable impact on 6 young artists of the city who were thinking afresh about the fate and current of Indian visual art. These artists comprised Francis Newton Souza, Krishanji Hawlaji Ara, Syed Haider Raza, Maqbool Fida Hussain, Hariyamba Das Gade, and sculptor Sadanand Bakre. In order to make sense of the formation of Progressive Artists Group, we need to learn about the events crucial to the decade of 1940s in India and in particular in Bombay, in which a concerted progression of a range of events led to India's independence. India witnessed a barrage of political upheavals during this decade. British engineered famine struck the Bengal province of British India, killing 3 million people due to starvation. Now, this becomes very crucial the decade of 1940s because the Quit India movement has gained a considerable momentum. The artists who later became part of PAG, as we'll see in this lecture, did not remain untouched by the socio-political atmosphere that was brimming up in 1940s. We'll see some of them faced acquittals, particularly JJ School of Art, from where Francis Newton Sousa was thrown out just because he participated in the Quit India movement and was a vocal supporter of India's liberation from the British rule. In 1942, as we talked about, the Quit India movement began. The idea of building an independent and integrated nation building was under its way very vehemently. Jawaharlal Nehru wrote his magnum opus, The Discovery of India, in the same decade in Ahmednagar Fort prison. Dr. Ambedkar was looking at the state of untouchables and the historic forms of oppression that was unleashed by the people from higher caste on the people from the lower castes. As we know, Baba Sahib Ambedkar was one of the most vocal proponents for the call of liberation from the British, as well as somebody who took the mission of liberating the untouchables, the lower strata of the society, from the oppression of the supremacy of the caste and religion. The demand for a separate nation for Muslims, which in the shape of Pakistan we right now see, had also gained a great momentum. In the domain of culture, if we talk about Progressive Writers Association, which becomes one of the most important precursors for the ideological formations of the Progressive Artists Group later on, was established in 1936. And People's Theatre Association, established in 1944, and several other visual artists groups who called themselves as progressives. For example, Calcutta Group, established in 1942. Progressive Association of Madras, established in 1944, had already started forming their own ideas and producing work that was critical of prevalent notions. So we see holistically, if we try to look at India of the pre-independence, we'll see that the cultural resistance is shaping up in all parts of the pre-independent India, and people are trying to make sense of their surroundings by not merely looking at what they have been taught, but at what they have not been told about, what has been underrepresented, which are the voices that have been curbed by the British. What are the cultural expressions through which they could make sense of their own livelihood and the people around them? With the indigenous cultural expressions, artists were trying to make sense of the life around them. Following the World War I, now this was an important factor in the formation of PAG because Europe had undergone a serious crisis on all spheres of life, be it culture, politics, socio-economic, socio-political, or any sector of life. The World War touched almost every nook and corner of Europe. The labor class and farmers had raised their voices. Intellectuals, writers, and thinkers were left with no choice but to raise their voices for revolution. In India, writers like Prem Chand and Josh Malayabadi had begun to express progressive ideas in literature. Now, these progressive ideas were not devoid of the local flavor. They talked about the folklore, they talked about indigeneity, they tried, as I said, to make sense of the lives around them, the atmosphere in which they lived, to make sense of the agony and the pain, the sufferings, the day-to-day life of the common people of India. Their focus was oppression mainly. They gave voice to the misery of downtrodden and untouchables in particular, and their state of mind, what they thought, what they desired, what were their superstitions, and their exploitation by the elite of the society. We have already talked about Marxist ideology. His theories proved exceptionally inspiring to the youngsters who aspired to take up literature or art as their career. In London, Sajjad Zahir and Mulkraj Anand attended the International Conference of Writers organized by Gorky and Thomas Mann, followed by the formation of Progressive Writers movement. Its manifesto was set in London. Now let's have a look at what Progressive Writers movement had to offer to the progressive group of writers and other intellectuals of India, and to the progressive artists group later on in their manifesto. So I quote from the manifesto, you can see it on your screen. It said, "We believe that the new literature of India must deal with the basic problems of our existence today." Now, here one can see that the progressive writers are talking about the current affairs. They are not falling on the history, they are not trying to fall back on the historical narratives, but they are talking about the life at present, of that present. The problems of hunger and poverty, social backwardness and political subjugation, social backwardness and political subjection. It must be noted that prior to the Progressive Writers movement, Urdu literature, especially poetry, had confined itself to sentimental and imaginative depictions. It was not at all concerned with the social problems. Now you can see that after the Progressive Writers movement, Urdu literature particularly, we see some of the very stark examples in Saadat Hasan Manto, in Ismat Choktai, in Faiz Ahmad Faiz, and so on, where the poets and the writers talked about the social and the political issues, particularly of the classes that were considered not so worthy to be mentioned or penned down in the history. They gave voice to the workers, to the laborers. They brought voices from the field into their literature and prominently talked about the oppression that was unleashed on the class of downtrodden. The progressive movement pushed the people, the writers, the intellectuals to think about their surroundings and look at the agony of the people who were under a brutal colonial rule under the British Empire. Now one can see that these voices are not devoid of the political immediacy or the political emergency that India was going through. Dr. Salim Akhtar, in his account on progressive movement, beautifully remarks, "Never before was Urdu literature proved a vehicle for some movement, nor was creatively considered a tool to profess some manifest." As we talked about, that Urdu literature was mostly imaginative in nature. It was utopian. It talked about love, it talked about pain, but that love and pain was not immediately that some person could connect with what he was going through in the day-to-day life. Of course, it had its importance in the domain of literature because of its vast imaginativeness, but it remained confined to that imaginarium of the mind where it talked about the matters of the heart pertaining to someone's longing, separation, but it completely neglected until the progressive writers movement the pain, the agony, the day-to-day problems of the human being, the problems of living under an oppression, living under a colonial rule, living under an occupation. It must be noted here that those who became part of the Progressive Writers Association were ideologically very close to communism and presented it as a solution to the socio-economic exploitation of the downtrodden. Taking inspiration from the movements that preceded them, a group of young men from Bombay, brimming with new ideas, formed the Progressive Artists Group in 1947. Its first exhibition was held in July 1948 in Bombay itself. Its founding member, Francis Newton Sousa, who was also its spokesperson, while drafting the manifesto of the group, wrote, "I do not quite understand now why we still call our group progressive. Not that the most retrogressive institutions call themselves so, but we have changed all the chauvinist ideas and the leftist fanaticism which we had incorporated in our manifesto at the inception of the group. To bring about closer understanding and contact between different sections of the artist community and the people, we found this in the course of working an impossibility because there is not only a permanent rift between sections of artists, between Whistler, Munings and Picasso, Archer Aker, Jamini Roy, but the gulf between the so-called people and the artists cannot be bridged." He continued, "Art will, as long as it remains, be esoteric. It cannot be utilitarian. Functional manufacturers of household commodities, didactic illustrational for school books or party journals, socialist putative art of the Soviet Union, and religious of the sorts we see today, painted clay Ganapatis and blonde operatic Christs. But then it is mercenary, pedagogic, political, and devotional, but never pure intrinsic art." He further continued, "Today we paint with absolute freedom, for contents and techniques almost anarchic, save that we are governed by one or two sound, elemental, and eternal laws of aesthetic order, plastic coordination, and color composition. We have no pretensions of making vapid revivals of any school of movement in art. We have studied the various schools of painting and sculpture to arrive at a vigorous synthesis." To return to Samuel Butler, the Erovian artists, he says, were not taught to paint but also to sell their works. Since we have never had such training, we have got the secret ambition of butlers, which is anagrammatically nowhere. Let's now have a close look at the lives of the artists who were part of the formation of the progressive group or joined it later on, and talk about their artistic lives and styles, how they started their careers, and what was art to them. How did they give expression to their imaginations? First, the oldest member of the group was Krishnaji Haulaji Ara or K.H. Ara. Ara was the oldest member, as I said. He was born in April 1914 in Sikandrabad. Ara was the oldest member of the group. He was born in April 1914 in Sikandrabad. At the age of 3, Ara lost his mother. After his father remarried, he ran off to Bombay at the age of 7. Life in Bombay wasn't that easy. He had to take all kinds of odd jobs for survival. He initially cleaned cars to earn his daily bread and butter. Later, he found a job with an English family as a houseboy. In his free time, Ara embarked on his passion for paintings and soon caught the attention of Rudy von Leyden, who then worked with Times of India as an art critic. Later on, Walter Langhammer, the editor of the Illustrated Weekly of India, saw the young Ara and was so impressed by the boy's talent that he got him enrolled at the Sir J.J. School of Art, Bombay. Ara started his artistic career with painting landscapes and socio-historical themes. But he excelled in still life painting and nudes. He is considered to be the first modern Indian painter to have focused on nude. Initially, watercolor and gouache were his pet mediums, but he later moved to oil paints. In 1942, Ara organized his first solo exhibition at the Chetana restaurant in Bombay. It was a successful show. He went on to join the Progressive Artists Group in 1948. He further held several shows with the group. He also held various solo and group shows in various other cities such as Ahmedabad, Baroda, Calcutta, and across Eastern Europe, Japan, Germany, and Russia. Ara also took part in the Salt Satyagraha during the civil disobedience movement and was imprisoned for 5 months. Once India was liberated from the British, Ara created a large painting depicting the Independence Day procession celebrations. Francis Newton Sousa, or simply known as F.N. Sousa, Sousa was born on April 12, 1924 in Goa in a Roman Catholic family. He lost his father to smallpox when he was barely 3 months old. His mother named him after the patron saint of Goa, Saint Francis Xavier. He soon lost his little sister also. His mother then migrated to Bombay, where she worked as a dressmaker. Sousa was admitted to St. Xavier's College, from where he was expelled for making obscene drawings on the walls of laboratories. He then joined Sir J.J. School of Art in 1940, where he learned portraiture and landscape painting. His overt patriotism and support for Quit India movement, which we talked about in the beginning, became the reason for his expulsion from the School of Art in the final year of his studies. Sousa joined the Communist Party of India in 1947. Soon he co-founded the Progressive Artists Group and became its spokesperson. As we said in the beginning, he drafted its manifesto as well. In 1949, Sousa moved to London, where he worked as a journalist. His career as an artist developed at a very slow pace. Celebrated art critic John Berger wrote positively about his work, calling his style deliberately eclectic and essentially expressionist in character. Art historian Yashoda Dalmia, while writing about his work, remarks, "At the heart of Sousa's creativity was the belief that society's destructive aspects shouldn't be suppressed. They should be aired and confronted. Be it the hypocrisy of the church, the corruption of upper class, or the repression of sexuality in a country that has khajra." He was uncovering the underbelly of existence. Sousa finally settled in New York and returned to India shortly before his demise in 2002. The large corpus of his work covers still lifes, landscapes, nude, and biblical subjects. For boldness is the hallmark of Sousa's work. He deliberately distorted the form and created images that are grim, ridden with guilt, desolation, sexual tension, exploitation, and conflict. Sousa has achieved a cult status in Indian art. He is one of the most celebrated artists of post-independent India. Maqbool Fida Hussain, the third most important member of the Progressive Artists Group, also known as M.F. Hussain, was born on September 17, 1915 in Pandharpur, Maharashtra. Hussain never went to any art college for education. Hailing from a materially humble family, he picked up the taste in art while learning calligraphy at a madrasa in Baroda. Largely self-taught, he started his career in Bombay by painting film posters and worked for a toy company. In 1948, Sousa came across Hussein's painting depicting potters at the Bombay Art Society's exhibition and decided to invite him to join the Progressive Artists Group. Arguably one of the most celebrated and internationally recognized painters of modern India, Hussain created works depicting a range of themes. His themes are as diverse as Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Ramayana, Mahabharata, British Raj, and various motifs of Indian urban and rural life. Hussain always treated his themes in series. Hussain repeatedly painted mythological subjects and triggered criticism for depicting sensitive subject matters such as Hindu goddess as nude. One such subject was Bharat Mata or Mother India. The painting depicted a bright red nude woman in the shape of Indian subcontinent. This enraged a certain section of the society, and Hussain faced a series of lawsuits and received death threats from extremists and was forced to leave the country in 2006 and live in exile in London and Dubai. He accepted citizenship of Qatar in 2010, shortly before his death. Another member of the progressive artist group, Syed Haider Raza or S.H. Raza, was born in February 1922 in Babaria, Mandala district of Madhya Pradesh. His father was the deputy forest range of the district. He started drawing at the age of 12 and completed his school education from Government High School, Damoh. Thereafter, he went to Nagpur School of Art and to JJ School of Art subsequently to study painting. He received a scholarship from Art Society of India to tour India for painting landscapes. In 1946, his landscapes won silver medal at the Bombay Art Society's annual exhibition and earned critical acclaim. Critics hailed him as the most sensitive painter of landscape. He joined the Progressive Artists group in the following year. Hari Ambadas Gade, or H.A. Gade, the fifth member of Progressive group, was born on August 19 in 1917 at Amravati in Maharashtra. He received his education at the University of Nagpur. He was the only artist from the PAG with a sound educational background. He was a science graduate and received his art education in Nagpur and JJ School of Art, Bombay. Gade started his artistic career by painting watercolor landscapes and subsequently moved to oils. He is considered among the first abstract artists of post-independent India. On Raza's insistence, Gade joined the Progressive Artists group after his exhibition at the Bombay Art Society in 1947. The sixth member, Sadanand Bhakre, of the Progressive Artists group, was born in Baroda on November 10, 1920s. Bhakre received his early education in Baroda. When his family shifted to Bombay, Bhakre was introduced to Charles Gerard, the then director of Sir J.J. School of Art. Gerard was impressed by Bhakre's drawing skills and admitted him in the school without the knowledge of his family. Bhakre joined the sculpture department because he had no means to buy painting material. In the sculpture department, the clay, plaster and other tools were taken care of by the school administration itself. The replicas of Greek and Roman sculptures that dotted the studios became the first inspiration for Bhakre at the JJ School of Art. Owing to this reason and his training in academic realistic style, which he grasped very soon, Bhakre developed a special taste for portraiture. His portrait titled My Father was first exhibited in the annual exhibition of Bombay Art Society in 1940. 2 years later, his portrait titled Seer won a prize in the exhibition. All his works were characterized by sensitive, careful modeling with distinct expressiveness. But he did not hesitate to experiment in various materials and techniques that he Although trained in pure academic style of sculpture, Bhakre did not hesitate to experiment in various materials and techniques that yielded him success. His friendship with Ara motivated him to join the Progressive Artists group. He was the only sculptor of the group. By the 1951, after its joint exhibition with the Calcutta group held at Calcutta, the group was disintegrated. Souza and Bhakre moved to London and Raza to Paris. However, the affairs of the group were looked after by Gade, who continued to organize its annual exhibitions in Bombay till 1954. By this time, new artists such as Krishna Khanna, Gaitonde and Akbar Padamsee had joined the group.